And good morning. Welcome to Cool Springs. Today is Sunday, October the 5th, 2025, and we are starting a new series of Bible studies for the month of October called Wrestling with God. And at the moment, the table is a little crowded. It's not going to be crowded for long because during our midweek podcast, we do a series called God Conversations. That's one of our short podcasts where we try to teach people, might need to close the door there, where we need to teach people how to have everyday conversations about everyday things and turn them into opportunities to impart the faith to the next generation. We had a morning like that this morning here at the church. When I first got here, our pastor's wife teaches the children's Sunday school class, and she brings with her a little boy who lives in her neighborhood. And so she's here early, and she's just practicing on the piano, but that leaves him free to roam around a bit. And the good news is he's already figured out that it's okay for him to play at church, that the adults won't get on his case about it. So he went into the children's Sunday school room where we have lots of props, and he picked out one. And the one he picked out happened to be our little cardboard fire stand here. And now I'm going to set it on the floor now that you've seen it, just to get it out of the way. So he pulled it out of the classroom, and he comes out here into the fellowship hall where Ann is still practicing on the piano, and he's playing with the cardboard fire. And I saw it, and I said, "Come in here, Johnny. Bring the fire with you. I've got something I want to show you," because it just so happens that this week will be the last of the fall festivals that God commanded the Jewish people to keep every year. There were 4 in the spring: Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, and Pentecost. And then in the fall, there was trumpets, the Day of Atonement, which was started Wednesday night at sundown and lasted until Thursday night at sundown. And 5 days after the Day of Atonement is a week-long feast called the Feast of Tabernacles. 2 years ago, the Feast of Tabernacles in Israel had just concluded, the last day of the feast, because they have a week-long 7-day feast, and then they have a holiday that's immediately after it on the 8th day called Simchat Torah, where they celebrate the fact that they finished reading all the way through the books of the law in a year's time, and then they'll start the cycle all over again. Kind of like in January in a lot of our churches, people will have a read through the Bible in the year plan. Well, they do that, and the end of the Feast of Tabernacles is when they have Simchat Torah, and they start a new series of readings again. It's a very special holiday, and it was the day 2 years ago when the terrorist Hamas from the Gaza Strip entered Israel and started butchering people and taking hostages, and we're still dealing with that here today, 2 years later. They chose to attack on a holiday. Just like in 1973, they chose to attack on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. So Johnny just happened to pick the fire to be the toy that he wanted to play with today. A couple of weeks ago, it was the winnowing fork, because it looked like a pitchfork, and he was running all over the church with a plastic pitchfork. Let them learn by play. So I brought him in here, and his teacher and some of the other adults came into him. We showed him the fire, and I explained to him that this coming Tuesday is going to start, for this year, the week-long Feast of Tabernacles. And what it celebrates is that from the time that they left Egypt until they actually entered the Promised Land, they had to camp out everywhere they went for 40 years. They had to build temporary shelters called booths, or Sukkot in the Hebrew term. And when they came into the land, God told them that every year you're to live for a week in these booths to celebrate the fact that everywhere you went when you were wandering in the wilderness, everywhere you went, God was with you. He appeared to them and protected them as a pillar of fire at night that blocked the Egyptians from being able to attack them as they were escaping from Egypt. You know, Pharaoh's army drowns in the sea because the pillar of fire is holding Pharaoh's army back. There are canyon walls. They can't get past the fire. while God parts the sea and lets the Israelites go through on dry land. But then when the Israelites are through, God lifts the fire, and now the Egyptians think they can just run through the sea too. And they get halfway through, and the waters crash down on them. At night, when they wandered in the wilderness, God provided that pillar of fire to provide warmth and light, because it gets very cold in the desert at night. During the daytime, God provided the cover of the clouds, because, as I explained to the kids that were in the kids' Sunday school class, I took off my watch and showed them the tan line, that when you're outside a lot in the warm weather, your sun will burn your skin if you're not careful, or if you put on some lotion, it'll just tan it. And that they had to wander for 40 years, so they needed some protection from the daily hot desert sun. And so that everywhere God went with the people, they knew he was there because they could see the cloud cover that went everywhere they went. And they could see the pillar of fire. And when they were celebrating this week-long Feast of Tabernacles, they were supposed to wave certain species of produce in front of their houses, their temporary booths. They would do it up above their heads, down at their feet, and in each direction, north, south, east, west. And the reason they would wave these palm branches, and when they would wave them back and forth, they would go like from one side to the other, and it would make the sound of rushing wind, and you could also feel a little bit of the breeze, just like you can fan yourself. And so I'm going to pass the palm fronds over and let the live audience see that. But they also had 4 species, and since the actual holiday begins on Tuesday, I'm not going to take these 2 out of their sleeves. I'll need to re-refrigerate them so that they'll last. They would have the myrtle and the weeping willow, and they would wave something that looked like palms of wheat. And they would also have citron, which would represent the fruit of the land. It was God's way of reminding them that everywhere you go, I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to provide for you. And so when I pulled the citron out, the little boy wanted to smell it, so I let him smell it. And it smells a little bit like a lemon because it is in the citrus family. This is a citron. And so I'll pass it around too. And the idea was that anywhere you go, God is with you. So Jews, even to this day and time, Jews, if they live in a climate where it's warm enough for them to camp out, they'll build these little temporary huts called booths or sukkot, and they'll camp out in them. If it's a climate where it's not necessarily wise to sleep out overnight in there, they'll at least set up tables and chairs, and they'll decorate it with fruits and with maybe little paper streamers to celebrate the fact that they're remembering everywhere we went, God was with us. And so it just so happens that the holiday coincides this week with what we're going to be studying this month, which is that everybody wrestles with God in one way or another. And so I have a camera operator turn us to the board for just a minute. Today we're going to be looking at Jacob wrestling with God, and our feature chapter is Genesis 28, but we're going to cover a lot of Genesis. Next week, if y'all want to read ahead for next week we're going to look at Moses answering God's call, and we'll look at Exodus chapter 3 for that one. Then on the 19th, we're going to look at Jeremiah the weeping prophet, and we're going to go several places in the book of Jeremiah. And then finally, we'll end up the month with looking at Naomi, Ruth, and us, at how each of these people, Jacob, Moses, Jeremiah, Naomi, Ruth, and you and me, sometimes we wrestle with God. We wonder what's going on, why things are happening the way they are. So we come back to the table now. Jacob is the twin brother of Esau. He and Esau are Isaac and Rebekah's only 2 children. Just like Abraham and Sarah had to wait many years for Sarah to conceive Isaac. When Isaac and Rebekah got married, They were married for 20 years before they had their two children. They had twin boys, and while Rebekah was pregnant with the two boys, they were struggling with each other, even in the womb. She was having a really rough pregnancy, and she wondered what was going on. She'd prayed so long to have a child, and now she's pregnant, and she's having a really, really rough pregnancy. And so she does the right thing. She prays and asks God about it, and she receives an answer from an angel that lets her know that there are two nations in your womb. That's good news to her. She knows she's going to have twins. It's the first recorded set of twins in the Bible. She's waited so long to have a child, and now she's going to have not one, but two. But the boys are going to be combative with each other throughout their lives. And the angel lets her know that the promise that Isaac, her husband, got from his father Abraham is going to go through the younger of the two boys. Well, Rebekah is certainly there when the boys come out of the womb. She knows which boy came out first and which one came out second. And what she does with this information that God allows her to have through the angel is that she starts to play favorites with that younger boy. He's only younger by a matter of minutes. He literally comes out grabbing onto his brother's heel. But he is the younger of the two, and under the customs and laws of their day and time, the oldest son, even if he's the oldest son by a matter of minutes, is going to inherit the double portion of the blessing, the double portion of the property, and will be considered the leader. So Isaac naturally favors Esau. Rebekah, knowing from the angel that the younger one is the one that the promised line is going to go through, she favors Jacob. And so as they're growing up, the parents unintentionally make things worse. The boys are natural rivals anyway of their brothers. Brothers are going to fight with each other, and they're going to try to see who's the biggest, strongest, and they're just going to do what boys do. I have 4 brothers, I know. But Isaac and Rebekah are making things worse by Isaac's favoring of Esau and Rebekah's favoring of Jacob. We're not told explicitly anywhere in Genesis whether or not Rebekah ever shared directly with Isaac the information that she got from the angel. We just simply don't know. We do know, though, that a time came when the boys are grown men and Isaac is old and his eyes are dim and he's pretty much close to bedridden. He's mostly going to just stay right there in the bed or move just a little bit. And he thinks that he's going to die soon. And because he thinks he's going to die soon, he starts to make some choices that are going to have some consequences for his family. He calls just his son Esau and tells him, I want you to go out in the field and kill some wild game and bring it back and cook it for me. You know the way I like it cooked. And when you do that, I'm going to give you my blessing before I die. Esau obediently goes out and does this. The problem was that when Isaac called Esau, he only called Esau. He had no intention, obviously, of preparing any sort of a blessing for Jacob. He doesn't include Jacob in this at all. He's just going to give the blessing to Esau. Rebekah had overheard it. While Esau's gone, Rebekah gets Jacob aside and tells him, this is what your father's about to do. Here's what you do. You go put on your brother's clothes. I'll make your daddy the food the way he likes it, because she certainly knows how her husband likes his food prepared. He can't see anyway. You go in there and you tell him that you're Esau and you get the blessing, because you see, once it was given, it was binding. Jacob isn't opposed to the idea of taking what his father intends for his brother. But Jacob's smart enough to realize, Mama, there's a hole in your plan. Esau's very hairy. They're twins, but they're not identical twins. They're fraternal twins. Esau is very hairy. Jacob has very smooth skin. He points out, what if he touches me? He's going to know right off the bat that I'm not Esau. Rebekah's got that covered. She's going to kill an animal, and she's going to basically tan the hide real quickly and put sleeves on Jacob so that since poor Isaac can't see anymore anyway, if he feels those hairy arms, he won't know that it's the skin of an animal. He'll still think it's Esau. And that's what happened. Jacob goes in. Isaac is suspicious a little bit. The voice sounds like Jacob's voice. Let me come closer. Certainly smells like Esau, the guy who was the hunter, the man of the field, the man's man, so to speak. Let me feel you. Okay, you feel like Esau. So he goes ahead and he gives the blessing to what he thinks is Esau, but is really Jacob. Jacob leaves. No sooner has Jacob gotten out of the tent and probably gone back and changed into his own clothes than here comes Esau. He's caught the game, he's prepared it, and he comes in. I'm here, Dad. I'm ready to receive the blessing, and Isaac realizes, something's up. And he goes on to explain to him that somebody else was just in here, and I gave them the blessing. And both Isaac and Esau immediately realize, Jacob, who else? And Esau is very, very angry at his brother. But he's also in mourning because his dad has given the blessing that was supposed to be Esau's. Isaac meant it for Esau. Didn't you save even one blessing? Bless me too. And Isaac has to come up with something on the spot because he really hadn't thought about giving something to each of his sons. And the blessing really sounds more like a curse that I've given everything to your brother. He's going to rule over you. He's going to inherit the blessing of our father Abraham. And now it's going to go to Jacob and not to you, Esau. But in the later years, you'll throw your brother's yoke off your neck. That doesn't sound like much of a blessing. Esau's hot. He's very hot. He wants now to pull a Cain. He's angry at his brother, and he wants to kill his brother. And Rebekah hears Esau talking about Dad's time's getting short. As soon as he goes, I'm going to kill Jacob, and then that blessing won't do him any good, and I'll still inherit everything, because after all, it's rightfully mine. That's the way Esau's thinking. And Rebekah knows her sons well enough to know that he means it. She's got to come up with a way to get Jacob out of the way. But you see, the whole thing is, from before they were born, Isaac and Rebekah know some things about God, but sometimes their actions don't follow through with what's God's best will. Isaac choosing to bless only Esau and getting tricked into giving it to Jacob without leaving anything good for the other son is going to cause a problem. And it's going to be more problematic as we learn the whole story, which I'm going to try to get in this less than an hour Sunday school lesson, is that Isaac wasn't as close to death as he thought. Why does he call Esau to his tent and tell him to go out and find that game? Because Isaac realizes, I'm getting old. I can't move around very good anymore. I can't hardly see. I can't go out into the field or plant crops or do anything. I'm probably about to die. Sometimes we run ahead of God by thinking we know what God's about to do, and we make poor choices when we don't give everything over to God and say, okay, God, what do you want? Because you see, as it turns out, Rebekah is going to tell Isaac, we need Jacob to go back to my family up in Syria. And he needs to find a wife from there, because Esau's already married these two local Canaanite girls, and they're nothing but heartache to me. I can't stand it. If Jacob marries one of these local girls, my life just won't be worth living. Now, she's being somewhat overdramatic. Yes, the girls that Esau has married are pagan, and yes, they are troublesome to Rebekah, but it's really her cover story to send Jacob away to do something he needs to do. It's time for you to be, you're a grown man, it's time for you to be finding a wife and starting to produce grandchildren. You know, a lot of times, as soon as a couple comes back from the honeymoon, some of the family wants to know, well, when are you going to start having kids? Rather than giving them a chance to even be a young couple for a little bit and get to know each other. Yeah, it's just human nature. Rebekah thinks she's sending Jacob away for a short period of time because she thinks sooner or later Esau will cool off and then Jacob can come home with a wife that's from my people who won't be this thorn in the flesh that these pagan girls that Esau is married are. And she thinks everything will just smooth out. The reality is that Jacob is going to be gone for the next 20 years. Rebekah will never see Jacob again. By the time Jacob comes home, 3 or 4 chapters further along in Genesis, Rebekah has died. When Jacob comes back, having been married to Leah, whom he got tricked into marrying, and that's fair, even in the way the world looks at it. Jacob tricked Isaac into giving him Esau's blessing. Isaac should have been fair to both sons, but Jacob tricked him into it and robbed his brother of the blessing. And so Uncle Laban, who is also going to be his father-in-law, is going to turn the tables on Jacob, and Jacob's going to get tricked into marrying Leah when he really worked for Rachel. And then he's going to have to work another 7 years to get the girl that he was first promised when Laban pulled the switcheroo in the tent. And in the meantime, as Jacob is married now to both sisters, Leah is able to have kids left and right, and Rachel, like Mama and like Grandma Sarah, seems to be unable to conceive. And so Rachel gets the idea of, here, take my servant girl. Don't you know your family story? How well did that work out when Sarah told Abraham, here, take my servant? The result was Ishmael and the whole Middle East crisis that we are still dealing with, a good 4,000 years after Sarah had this not so bright idea, and Abraham, instead of asking God, what is your will in this situation? Abraham just went along with it. And we have the Middle East crisis we have today because of decisions that were made poorly thousands of years ago. No, when Jacob finally returns 20 years later, Isaac's still alive. He's even older than he was when he thought he was about to die. He's now very, very senior citizen, but he's still alive. And who's been there taking care of him all this time? Esau. Isaac is still alive. Rebekah is long gone. She thought she was going to outlive Isaac. Esau thought he was going to kill Jacob. Jacob thought he was only going to go away for a short period of time till his brother cooled off. And he wound up having to stay for 20 years to learn his lesson about how sometimes when you cheat other people, the wheel goes round, the shoe is now on the other foot, and he's the one who's being tricked by his father-in-law over and over and over again. But that's the long story. Here today in chapter 28, he's getting ready to go on that journey. Mama has persuaded Dad to send him to Laban to go find a wife from among your mother's people. Marrying your cousins in that day and time was not forbidden. And since they are technically family, the girl that Jacob brings home is less likely to be a heartache to Rebekah, because that girl is going to be raised by Rebekah's own brother. The problem is Rebekah isn't going to still be there. Jacob's going to be gone for 2 decades. And by the time Jacob comes home with Leah and Rachel and the servant girls and all of his children, Rebekah is long since in the grave. But at this point in the story, she's getting ready to send him, and Isaac's getting ready to send him. And Jacob, at this point in his life, isn't terribly close to God. In fact, the reason I chose chapter 28 to be where we focus today is because he's been raised in this household where he's been told all of his life about how God called his grandfather Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldees, and how God was with Abraham and Sarah everywhere they went, and how Isaac was born to Abraham and Sarah when Sarah was 90 and Abraham was 100, and how God has been with Isaac all this time and has provided Rebekah to be his wife and to raise these two boys, Esau and Jacob. He knows the family story, but he hasn't bought into it yet that Daddy's God is going to be my God, and Grandpa's God is going to be my God as well. So let's look now at Genesis chapter 28. So Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him and commanded him, do not marry a Canaanite woman. Go at once to Paddan Aram, to the house of your mother's father Bethuel. Take a wife for yourself there from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now live as an alien, the land that God gave to Abraham. Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way, and he went to Paddan Aram, to Laban the son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, who was the mother of Jacob and Esau. Jacob's on his way. Isaac has now told him, okay, that blessing, you're going to inherit this land. The promise that God gave to Abraham that came to me, not to my half-brother Ishmael, is going to go to you, not to your full brother Esau. God's going to bless you. Isaac's got faith. Esau doesn't have that kind of faith. In fact, Esau's going to interpret what's about to happen the wrong way, and Jacob certainly doesn't have that faith, because we're going to see him camping out overnight and using a stone for a pillow and seeing this vision of a ladder or a stairway reaching from earth to heaven and angels going up and down on it. And he's going to have his come to God moment. And Jacob is at that point going to say, God, if you'll be with me, if you'll bless me, if all the things that Dad blessed me with come true, then God, I'm going to serve you. Because you see, he's not quite there yet. But he's on his way. Meanwhile, back at home, Esau knows the brother he was out to get, the brother he was just itching to kill. As soon as Daddy dies, I'm going to kill Jacob. Well, Daddy's not dead. Daddy's not going to die for a long, long time. They just don't know it. But Esau does hear the reason Dad sent my brother off to go to our uncle's house way up in Syria. Mom and Dad don't like the girls I married. So he's going to try to fix it. But he's going to try to fix it the wrong way. What's going to happen with Esau in the next few verses is he hears about this and he realizes, okay, some of the choices I've made don't please my mom and dad. I'll just go get another wife. He's already got two. Now he's going to go get a third one. And where's he going to go? He's going to go to Uncle Ishmael's house and get one of Ishmael's descendants to be wife number 3, thinking, well, that'll satisfy mom and dad. Esau is looking to please himself and to please mom and dad. But he's not ever asking, God, what do you think about this? God, what's the right thing to do? Jacob's not there yet either. Jacob's off on his way to go find a wife. He knows he's got to escape town because Mama's already told him, your brother Esau wants to kill you. I'll fix it with Dad. You just get ready to go. And she thinks it's going to be a short time. Sometimes we don't know what God's going to do in our lives And when we're uncertain about what the future holds, particularly when we're at a crisis or a crossroads, or we're worried about what's going to happen next, we need to remember what happened with Jacob and Isaac and Rebekah and Esau and go, I don't want to be like them. I don't want to act first, come up with my own plan, ask God to bless it, and think it's going to work out all right. We need to stop and ask God first. God, what is it that you want? If Rebekah ever told Isaac about what the angel let her know, then clearly Isaac didn't follow through with it, because he continues to favor Esau as the boys are growing up, and he plans to bless only Esau. And the blessing that he gave all the leadership and all the inheritance to Jacob, whom he thought was Esau. Possibly Isaac didn't know what the angel had told Rebekah. That's a communication problem within the marriage, when husbands and wives aren't honest with each other, and when they're not both on the same spiritual page. What do we see Rebekah doing in this? Clearly it's a long, successful marriage, but somehow there's a whole lot of deceit that's crept in here. She's willing to deceive her husband to favor Jacob over the other child that's also her child. This is not like Esau is her stepson. Esau is the son of her body too. But she's favoring Jacob to the exclusion of Esau, just like Isaac is favoring Esau to the exclusion of Jacob. And it's caused a problem in the marriage. They're not being honest with each other. And it's caused a problem between the sons. The brothers aren't getting along as well as they otherwise could have. And it's going to cause a whole lot of separation from each other over time. Rebekah has not been honest with Isaac. She could have told Isaac, I'm the one who talked Jacob into doing this. Now Esau is very, very angry, and he's threatening to kill Jacob. Because Isaac's still alive, he's still the head of the family, he could have ordered Esau to cool off. Don't you dare try to steal your brother's life or your brother's property. He could have talked to him about how God will provide for you too, but this family has some issues. They're pretty tanked up. The second most tanked up family in the Bible is Jacob's family. Number one has got to be David's family. But Jacob's family is a close second with some of the shenanigans they're pulling. Jacob's going on this journey now. Esau's trying to make it right, and he's not really making it right at all. He's just gone out and added another girl to the family, this time from one of his cousins, Uncle Ishmael's descendants. And we pick up in chapter 28 again with verse 17. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, all capital letters. He's seeing into heaven, and he's seeing God. And he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and the east, the north and the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you, and I watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He's just had his salvation encounter, a BC salvation encounter. God's promised him, I love you, I care about you. I'm not going to forget you or forsake you. I'm going to be with you. And Jacob, even though you're leaving this land now, even though, Jacob, you've still got some growing and some learning to do, when the time is right, I'm going to bring you back, and you and your descendants will fill this land, north, south, east, and west, and all the world is going to be blessed because of what I, God, am going to do through you. That is a wonderful, wonderful blessing. Jacob, you've been chosen. You and I, and the people that we love and care about and witness to, they need to know God's chosen all of us for salvation. But we have to accept God's offer, and we have to do it God's way. God's just made this promise to Jacob, and Jacob is waking up from his sleep, and now Jacob is about to make his own profession of faith in God. But he's still got some major growing to do. God's got to help him mature up. God's not finished with Jacob. In fact, Jacob's spiritual journey is just now beginning. When Jacob woke up from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place and I wasn't aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. Anointing oil. He's learned some of the religious customs that Isaac got from Abraham, and now he's starting to practice a little bit of faith in God. He called that place Bethel, which means house of God, though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I'm taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. Jacob has just pledged a covenant relationship with God, but it's conditional. God, if you'll do your part first, if I'm sure you're out there, if I'm sure you care about me, then I'll do this. I'll worship you and I'll give you a tenth of everything. And what's he longing for already? And remember, this is his first night away from home, ever. God, if you'll let me return to my father's house. He's hoping that Dad will still be alive when he gets back. He and Rebecca at this moment think it's going to be just a short time. You go up there, you spend a little bit of time, wait for your brother to cool off, and come back with a wife, and all will be well. Well, things didn't work out according to plan. Like I said, he's going to be gone for 20 years. While he's gone, he's going to encounter Uncle Laban, who gives him a taste of his own medicine on steroids, so to speak, because you shouldn't work for me for nothing. Really, Jacob's just trying to hide out for a few weeks for Esau to cool off. But he's already seen Rachel, and she's pretty, oh so pretty, and he wants a wife. I'll work for you for 7 years. Laban didn't propose that. Jacob did. You've just signed up for a 7-year loan. You may have signed up for long-term loans for cars or even longer-term loans for houses and things. Jacob wants to return to his parents' home. He wants to come back with a wife. He doesn't want to have to worry about his brother getting angry and killing him the minute his daddy dies. But Jacob, you just signed up to spend the next 7 years of your life in Syria working for Uncle Laban. And he works, and it says in the scripture that the 7 years seemed like just nothing in the way of time passing because he was just so in love. He was in season. He wanted to get married. He saw a pretty girl. He wanted to get married. And when his 7 years are up, he goes to uncle/future father-in-law. I've worked my 7 years. Give me my wife so that I can go sleep with her. In the room right now, it happens to be all females that are in here. Some are married, some aren't. But the ones who are married, at some point in time, you agreed to get married. Possibly, your husband went to go talk to your parents to ask for your hand in marriage. That was kind of a tradition that some people do, some people don't. And I'm pretty sure that if I was to go out into the sanctuary when it's time for the church service and do a survey of every married man in the group, did you go and ask your father-in-law and mother-in-law for their daughter's hand in marriage? What did you say? Not one of them is going to say, well, I've served my time. Give me your daughter so that I can go sleep with her. That would not be, even in the 21st century when a lot of things are crude, that would not have been the way to approach it. It would be a case of, I love your daughter, I want to provide for, all the stuff that tries to persuade somebody to say, yeah, if my daughter wants to marry you, I'm not going to object to it. Jacob goes to Laban. Hey, my time's up. Deal's done. It's time for me to have my wife so that I can sleep with her. Laban pulls the switcheroo in the tent. When Jacob wakes up the next morning, and there's light finally in the tent, that's not Rachel. That's Leah. And he's angry. And he goes charging out to his father-in-law, what did you do to me? Didn't I work for Rachel? And then Laban springs this little, oh, well, it's not our custom to marry off the younger before the older. Somewhere in that 7 years, that topic might needed to have come up, but it didn't. Just like somewhere in Isaac and Rebekah's marriage, they should have talked about how God had blessed them with 2 sons after 20 years of not being able to have children, but how God's promise was going to go through the younger son. So what can we do to prepare both children correctly to know that God loves both of you, but God's chosen this one for this special mission? Maybe they could have saved the family from all the heartache and the fussing and fighting if they'd done the right thing about trying to raise their children to understand who God is and that God loves them both. But what they did was it was brother versus brother, and in some ways it was husband not sharing information with his wife and wife not sharing information with her husband. There's no record that Isaac consulted with Rebekah, gave her a hint at what he was thinking about doing by blessing just Esau. Rebekah certainly pulled the wool over Isaac's failing eyes. They're not perfect people. They make mistakes on the way. They were wrestling with God and how God's working things out in their lives. And sometimes you and I wrestle with, God, I don't know why this is happening. Today happens to be October the 5th. 4 years ago, right after my husband had passed, the government wasn't shut down at that point in time, but it was time for one of those annual, you have to make sure your information is up to date. And my supervisor got a warning email saying, hey, it's time for Nancy to have to do her annual update. We need to know who to contact in case of an emergency. And my supervisor saw that email and knew, okay, she's got to forward it to me, but she also knows she lost her husband a month ago. She's about to have to erase him from the record books and put somebody else in his place. And that's going to bite. And so she forwarded the email, but then she came immediately over to my office and told me what was in the email before I ever opened it. And she sat there with me, and let me just deal with it a little bit. because this is a terrible task, but it's got to be done. The government can't contact a next of kin who is not alive in case of an emergency. There's got to be somebody living put in there. But the fact that you have to take somebody out and then figure out who you're going to substitute in wasn't a pleasant experience. And she knew it wouldn't be. So she was just there to be with me through that. Looking back on it, because it's now been 4 years since that happened, I see God's hand at work in a lot of little things. And you see, that's the point. Jacob and Esau and Isaac and Rebekah weren't looking for God in the little things, so they missed God in the big things up until God had to get Jacob's attention by letting him see this stairway to heaven and telling him, I'm going to be with you. Yes, you're having to leave home, but it's going to be all right. Because I had only been in that job just a little over a year. The job that I had held for decades in the government, the budget got cut. But because I had so much seniority, I knew the government's going to have to place me somewhere because I've got seniority over other people. God took me out of a position that I was comfortable in and put me in a different job, but he put me with exactly the right group of people. Not only was the supervisor a good person and a believer in God, but everybody in the office was a believer in God. And so they were there to help me through the little sting moments, like having to take him out as my emergency contact, and through the big moments of having to go back to work when my whole world had changed in a matter of a few weeks' time. Isaac and Rebekah had some shortcomings as parents, and God still loved them. That's the good news for you and me. Esau and Jacob eventually will reconcile with each other. When Jacob comes back home 20 years later, he hears that Esau's coming to greet him with 400 men, and Jacob immediately has a, all my chickens are about to come home to roost type of moment. So he sends gifts ahead, trying to appease his brother, trying to pay him back for what he stole from him years before. And Esau tells him, you keep your gifts. I'm fine. I'm good. They got to a place where they were reconciled with each other. Jacob is going to spend the next 20 years of his life growing in his understanding of God, growing in his faith. Sometimes he's going to make good decisions. Sometimes he's going to make not so good decisions. When he comes back and he's getting ready to cross the Jordan River to go back into the Promised Land, he's arranged his family with the concubine girls and their children in the front. That's going to lead to more problems in his own sons as they grow up. Then Leah, who technically was the senior wife, and her sons. Then Rachel, his favorite wife, and little Joseph, and Rachel happens to be pregnant at that point, in the rear, so that if anybody escapes, it'll be my pet wife, my favorite one. Yeah, we'll sacrifice all the others to try to protect her. If you're a human shield, the chances are good that you know you're being used as a human shield. Jacob is going to send the family ahead, and he's going to spend the night on the east side of the Jordan River, and he's going to have another encounter with God where he's going to wrestle all night long, and he'll wind up with a hip injury that he'll have for the rest of his life. He's going to walk with a limp for the rest of his life because he's been wrestling with the Almighty. He's got to decide whether or not he's going to be faithful. You and I, when we're going through our lives, we're going to have things that are going to sometimes rear up and bite us. It may be things that are directly connected to us, or it may be things about people we love and care about. A loved one whose illness, that in spite of how hard we've prayed for them to be healed, it's their time to go. It may be a wayward child or a grandchild that doesn't want to share the faith that you have, or is out there living a lifestyle that you know is going to lead to trouble. That they're just going to do harm to themselves and possibly to other people. And you got to try to figure out, what's the right thing to do? First and foremost, you go to God with all your troubles, with all your cares. A lot of the problems that Isaac and Rebekah and Esau and Jacob faced could have been nipped in the bud if their first thought was on, God, what is it that you're trying to teach me through this situation? God, I'm going to trust you no matter what life throws at me. No matter how bad I hurt, no matter who I lose, no matter what illness or disease or incapacity I have to come up with, God, I'm just going to trust you in your love. We all need to be wrestling with God. The good news is that each of the people we're looking at, even though they had to go through some hard times, even though they made some blunders along the way, they wound up trusting God. And so we get to look forward to meeting them in eternity. And it's good news for us that if people can mess up as bad as Jacob messed up, Moses, the lawgiver, he's going to mess up so bad that God's not even going to let him go into the promised land. Jeremiah, Naomi, Ruth, you and me, God loves us enough to wrestle with us and to call us to himself. So next week, read ahead, just Exodus chapter 3. Thanks for watching.